So I went for a look around Bleeding Fingers, which is Hans's company. It's his studio complex in LA where him and a bunch of other composers all work. I went for a look around earlier in the year, and Russ, who helps Hans run the place, as we were looking through these studios and seeing all these amazing different composers working on all these amazing projects, he turned to him and was like, "Oh, I've been thinking about, whether you'd be up for doing a little bit of work on Planet Earth 3. Obviously I was like trying to be normal about it, but in my mind I was like, this is fucking amazing, and then to him was like, yeah, sure, I'd be up for that. And I wasn't sure if it was a reality or not, and then a couple of weeks later they came back and said the BBC have approved it, and so we want to get you involved. So they immediately started sending me scenes. We were in rehearsal for the tour for this year, and I had a bunch of scenes that I was looking at and started trying to write music to. I remember sending my first scene over to them and being like, fuck, I hope you like it. I would get sent a scene like this, these incredible images. Sarah, Jacob and Hans will have started a bit of score, so there'll be some sort of temp score over there. And I would get a direction like, can you try loads of different vocal ideas? So I would sit there and layer up a choir of me, basically, as you can see here. Each one of these are different layers of my voice. And I would do loads of ad-libs over the top. And yeah, they seem to be really into it, which was great. Seeing the lengths people go to capture these images is really amazing. There's like one shot of super slow-mo, like a shark jumping up and eating a seal that's pretty amazing. Those shows are so amazingly eye-opening and transportive, and the reason there's 3 series of it is because there's just so much. You can never, the producers always say that, nature writes the best scripts. Like, it's the stories they tell, the tone of it's amazing as well. Like, it's kind of beautiful and yearning and sad, but then funny as well. They always seem to like find the biggest jokers in the natural world. I love their little cutaways. There'll be like a stressful hunting situation and like cut to some little bird who's just like staring at the side, giving it a side eye. I got sent the theme, the sort of main opening theme, which they'd written, and they asked if I wanted to add bits to it. So I wrote a bunch of vocal lines, and we collaborated from there. It was really fun. They booked a studio, Grove Studios in London, and they all came over for a couple of days, and we spent some time in that studio recording all the vocals properly, because I do the rest of it sort of by myself on my laptop. Throughout the year, they would send me more scenes with some notes and direction, and I would sit on tour in these backstage rooms and or on our bus or wherever, headphones on, little microphone. My setup is literally a pair of headphones. I know I look completely mental. This little MIDI keyboard and a microphone. I remember there's a kind of big waves scene in the Coast episode that I did a bunch of vocals for. After a gig in the UK on the tour bus, everyone was getting pissed up in the backstage bit, and I was like, I've got an hour before everyone descends on the bus and the bus leaves to get as much done as possible, and it had a deadline was that night at like 1 a.m, so I like went off after the gig, put my headphones on in the upstairs lounge. I had to do 2 days of recording by myself in a hotel room in Pittsburgh when we were on a break from tour, and I was like, right, gonna get into the Planet Earth vibe, and you check into your hotel room, not sure what you're gonna see. Check out the lovely, inspiring view from my hotel window where I've been trying to work on my Planet Earth stuff. Dun 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 dun. I was like, that's inspiring. It's fine. I was like, I don't need to look at that. I've got the images in my laptop. It's great. So sat there, and then it was weird. Like, we're right in downtown, so it's kind of bustling downtown area. And there was also a weird locust storm of this particular Asian moth locust that is not meant to be in that part of America for the ecosystem. So I was like slightly going mad, singing over and over and over again into this particular nature scene. And then when I went for a head break, I was like right in the middle of a city where there was a big old locust storm. And this, because these locusts have to be killed, everyone was running around like stamping on these locusts, and it was just added to the weirdness of the situation. Later in the year, they reached out and said, what would you guys think about doing a version of Pompeii with Hans for the end credits and, you know, and potentially the trailer and stuff like that. And obviously we completely lost our shit and were very excited. Also, it was coming up to sort of 10 years since the song came out, so it just felt like a really lovely thing to do. We've done a bunch of reorchestrated stuff before, which was a real passion project of mine. So getting to do that sort of with Hans was insane. With reorchestrated, I think it was about totally dismantling our songs and reconstructing them as something new. So almost like remixing, but with classical sounds. And you know, Johnny, the composer that we worked with, and all the vocal arrangers that we worked with, and the stuff that I did, we were very keen to sort of try and completely reframe the songs. And it's a really interesting exercise, you know, taking away all the production from something and having just the vocal and the lyrics, and then, you know, changing the chords, changing the sounds. I was thinking about what we could get out of this musically, and it was important to me that we sort of held back as much as possible for as long as possible. So knowing the scale of Planet Earth and you know how big and epic Hans can go on his arrangements, I think it was always understood that we would get there by the end of the track, but I was quite keen to like hold off on drums, push all the percussion right down, lean into the strings and lean into the brass and lean into the orchestration, because those are the things that for me are exciting because they're as far from the original as possible. So I guess it was about, like, the original exists. People know the drums from that track. They know, you know, the sort of soaring vocals or whatever. So like, how can we pull that right back? And you know, Hans starts with a bunch of interesting atmospherics and you know, goes into this beautiful string arrangement. And yeah, and then the brass come in and there are all these different lines that sort of weave in and out of the track. I don't know if we can even physically get bigger than what we just did with this Hans version of Pompeii. Like, it's incomprehensibly massive. You're like, you think you've hit the peak of the track, and then he like notches it up again. Like, oh no, there were more instruments you could fit in this room, and there is more sound. So Pompeii started life in, like, I know I say it a lot, but like on my laptop in my bedroom. The reason that the chant exists is because I heard it as a guitar riff, but I can't play guitar. So for all the first album stuff, all the intros and outros and stuff were all in my head guitar riffs, but I had to sing them or put them on like strings or a synth or something because I couldn't play guitar. And then that became a bit of a rule for that album. Like, there weren't any guitars on it, there couldn't be any guitars on it. And it was like, how do we make almost like an indie record that doesn't have any guitars? I had no idea, like, not a clue. The song would even be a single, let alone, you know, define so much of like our lives and our band and people's perception of us. And yeah, it's always weird when you know, no one really had a sense that it would do what it did. If you said to me 10 years ago or whatever that song would be a successful song, I wouldn't have believed you, let alone that 10 years later we get to do it with one of my favourite composers. Like, yeah, it's insane. The music that I love definitely leans more kind of mellow and classical, and those sort of soundtrack score elements have always been a big part of what we've done. Like, on our first mixtape, we sampled like the Kronos Quartet's score for Requiem for a Dream, and actually we sampled part of his score from True Romance, which is one of my favourite scores, with this sort of really distinctive, like, kind of hopeful marimba sounds. We sampled that and put another track over the top of it. Sorry, Hans. The music that I'm working on at the moment is much more in that world, which is really fun. I feel like, having done Give Me the Future, I know, you know, I've sort of known what this next album is going to be for a while, and now I'm getting to just really enjoy that process. I want to take elements of that world, but I don't want the scale to be big. Like, it's important to me that the next thing that we do feels very sort of like real and in the room and small. And I love the idea of there being strings, but it would be kind of Eleanor Rigby-esque quartet rather than a massive 50-piece string section. We were lucky enough to record the Hans version of Pompeii at Hodiernott Hall in Cardiff with the National Orchestra, BBC National Orchestra of Wales, who are incredible. There was a moment when they were recording the chant, the Eto bit in Pompeii, and me and Will looked at each other as the orchestra were playing this incredible thing. We were like, we've got some fucking mileage out of this song, haven't we? I was like, yeah, no, we've really rocked it. But yeah, I think we were all just so excited to be part of it.